Begin. We're starting a recording, and we are. Seems like it's lecture number 8. We're getting to the halfway point of the course, and the the Iliad and the Odyssey loom so large that I never mind. I never have issues with giving over all this time to them, because you really it grounds your understanding of everything else, not only in Greek literature, but in Roman literature and European literature. And we are in the Odyssey, where we have left Odysseus in Phaeacia. He is going to make his way home, but he is exhibiting strange signs of arrogance, loss of sense of self. He looks like he wants to stay there and maybe marry the princess. Odysseus is the destroyer of cities, right? That's his nickname. That's his epithet, Ptoliporthon, right? The sacker of cities, he's often called in the actual Greek, and he may indeed be the sacker of cities that are even friendly ones. So we're going to not really go into the stories that you may have heard from childhood, the stories of the Cyclops and Circe and the Sirens and things like that. What I would really like to do is focus on things that are both connected to our overall discussion of narcissism, and also things that sort of move the plot forward. Book 11 is a very intriguing one, because in that book, Odysseus has to go to consult the spirits of the dead. They need to tell him how to continue his journey back home. So this is a story. It's a story that's told within the stories of the Phaeacians, and it's probably another way for Odysseus to wow them. It's like, not only can he do all of these amazing things and overcome all of these monsters and overcome these difficulties and overcome magic and all that stuff, but he actually can go to the underworld. He can sort of come back from the dead, right? Who can do that? I mean, in Greek mythology, only Heracles to go down into the underworld and come back, or Orpheus, but Orpheus was not hostile to the people in the underworld. I mean, Heracles went down there to steal the dog, to steal Cerberus. Orpheus just went down to make a case to bring his wife back. It's not easy to confront the king of the dead, to confront Hades and Persephone and get back. Well, he doesn't actually, he consults the ghosts, but he doesn't actually, Odysseus doesn't actually sort of descend into any kind of like cave-like whatever backdrop, which would suggest Hades. He has to consult specifically the ghost of prophet Tiresias. Tiresias is an interesting character whose story is told really in the cycle of the story of Oedipus the king, Oedipus at Colonus, and Antigone, the so-called Theban trilogy. The story that goes that Tiresias got his gift of prophecy because of a very curious relationship with the gods. Yes? Oh, question? Okay, so this is what happened to Tiresias in mythology. He was walking down the road somewhere between Thebes and Corinth, and he saw two snakes having sex. And for whatever reason, whether he was just malicious or absent-minded or whatever, or curious, he actually hit them with his walking stick and he separated them. The gods were angry at his, or specifically Aphrodite was angry at this behavior. And as a punishment, she turned Tiresias into a woman. And Tiresias lived as a woman for some years. And then when Tiresias in his altered gender, happened to see two snakes once again mating. He hit them again, and lo and behold, he turned back into a man. So he had lived life as both a woman and a man, and he had had relations with both women and men. So one day, on Olympus, Zeus was having an argument with the rest of the gods, and the argument was, who enjoys sex more? Is it men or women? And they decided that they should ask someone who had the experience of both being both a man and a woman. And so they said, "Oh, Tiresias, he's perfect, right?" So they asked Tiresias, and Tiresias said, "Oh, it's the women who enjoy sex more." Well, Hera, Zeus's wife, was very upset at this. She somehow felt shame that this should be the case, and so she punished Tiresias by making him blind. And Zeus, who felt like he had, he had won the bet because he was betting that it was women. Zeus wanted to make it up to Tiresias in some way, and he couldn't take back the blindness. So what he did was he gave Tiresias the gift of prophecy. Tiresias was able to foretell the future. When Tiresias dies, he continues in some sense in the underworld to be a kind of a wise man or a soothsayer, although one would expect that everybody in the underworld pretty much knows past, present, and future. It's not so much the case in the Greek version, certainly not in the Odyssey version of the underworld. So you have to give blood to these ghosts in order for them to talk, because their bodies are not really fully there. They're kind of like just shadows or shades. Sometimes they're called shades. So Tiresias was not a god. He was just a mortal, just a man who died, but died still retaining some of this sort of gift of prophecy. So Odysseus pours blood, a sacrificial victim, offering for the ghosts, and Tiresias comes to drink the blood. But a lot of the ghosts want to drink the blood because they want to sort of come back to life. It's not fun being dead. They're conscious, they're awake, but they know that they can't do anything. And for a society which is so rooted in its sort of physical, existence, not enough just to be sort of sentient and conscious person. You want to be able to engage in human activities. So Tiresias tells Odysseus, yes, you will get back home, but first you have to kill the suitors, either by cunning or openly, right? Either you got to do it by trick or you got to attack them head on, because you're Odysseus, you know how to do these things. And then what you have to do is you have to pick up an oar and travel until you come to a race that knows nothing of the sea. In other words, after all of this heartache, getting back to Ithaca, rejoining with your family and taking vengeance on all these suitors who are in your house, you can't really stay there, Odysseus. You got to go back on the road, right? You've got to go find a place where no one has any knowledge of seafaring. Like they're so far inland that they don't have boats, they don't have access to the sea. And carry this oar on your shoulder until you meet someone that thinks that you're carrying a winnowing fan. What's a winnowing fan? Well, it's shaped like an oar, but what you do is you use it when you crush up the grain to get to separate the wheat from its shell, from its chaff, right? You got to crush up the grain in a threshing floor, and then you got to create a sort of a breeze, right? It's like a fan. So you blow off all of the chaff, and then you have cleaner wheat that you can then process. So that would indicate, like, you got to go to a farming community where they're so far away from the shoreline that they have no idea about, sailing. And there, you must plant your oar in the ground and make a sacrifice to Poseidon, a really big sacrifice, ram or bull or something like that. And then you can leave for home and make sacrifices to all the gods. So what Odysseus has to do is he has to appease, he has to make good his injury to Poseidon. Poseidon, who's dealing out all these troubles for Odysseus, is upset with him because he hurt Poseidon's son, the Cyclops. He blinded the Cyclops. So until Poseidon feels better about this, Odysseus cannot rest, right? So having gotten the information he went for, he now kind of prods Tiresias. He wants more information. Um, so he says, Tiresias, no doubt the gods themselves have created this fate, spun out this fate for me, but tell me, is my mother here? Has she died in the interim? Because he's been away for 20 years, right? And it turns out, in fact, that she did die, and he is able to see her. His mother takes some of the blood from the sacrifice that he offered, and now is able to speak to him. And she says, "My son, how do you come, you who are living, to the gloomy dark? This is a place of the dead, right? It's difficult for those alive to find these realms, since there are great rivers and dreadful waters between us, right? How did you get here? Are you just getting here from Troy?" And Odysseus, talks about his troubles, and then asks her how he died, and she says, "No, I was just pining away, and you know, as your wife is now." And she tells him that Telemachus is still alive and still kind of in charge, but her own husband, Odysseus's father, is alone. He's kind of consumed in grief. He doesn't come back to the city and mix with people anymore. He sleeps in rags. He sleeps with his servants. Because he can't get over the loss of his son. So she herself, Anticlea, the mother, just says that she just died naturally of old age. Some disease took her when she was very old, but he has to go back and actually right. So she spoke, and I wondered, says Odysseus, I wondered how I might embrace my mother's dead ghost. 3 times my will urged me to clasp her, and I started towards her. 3 times she escaped my arms like a shadow or a dream. So, he can't embrace the ghost. He says, Mother, since I wish it, why do you not let me embrace you? So that even in Hades' house, we might, clasp each other. Are you a mere phantom? Like, are you just like an image? And his mother answers him, "Oh, no, you don't understand. This is the way it is with mortals after death. The sinews no longer bind the flesh and the bone. The fierce heat of the blazing fire, the fires of the underworld, consume them, and the spirit flees from our white bones, a ghost that flutters and goes like a dream." So nobody can be touched in the Greek underworld. You can't, they're sort of, intangible. They're wispy. They're like smoke. And when they drink the sacrifice, they get a little bit more sort of embodied. They become a little bit more 3D. But essentially, they're like, they're not really bodies. And it is. It is so there's a whole kind of big to do, which is sort of the catalog of women, now famous women from mythology, is the next bit. But it's sort of like seeing a movie in the afterlife. All of the famous characters that from Greek mythology are represented here. But when he continues the story, Odysseus tells of meeting with the ghost of Agamemnon. When Agamemnon's ghost approached, and the other ghosts were gathered around him, those who met their fate alongside him, murdered in Aegisthus's palace. Like when Agamemnon was killed by Aegisthus and Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, the people who were killed with him kind of stay with him in the afterlife, in Hades. So as soon as Agamemnon recognizes Odysseus, he starts weeping and he tries to stretch out his hands, but all his power and strength were gone. And Odysseus starts weeping when he sees him, and he says, Agamemnon, king of men, glorious son of Atreus, what pitiless stroke of fate has destroyed you? Did Poseidon kill you with a tempest, with with the sea swamping your ships, or perhaps you were attacked in enemy country, right? What was it? And he said, no, no, Odysseus, um, sign of Zeus, son of Laertes. No, it wasn't Poseidon who swamped my ships, nor was I attacked in an enemy country. It was Aegisthus who engineered my fate, inviting me to his palace for a feast, murdering me with my accursed wife's help, as you might kill an ox in its stalls, killed like an animal, right? I died wretchedly, and around me my companions were slaughtered ruthlessly, um, like sacrificial animals. Um, the most pitiable cry of all the people who were killed with me came from Cassandra, Priam's daughter, whom treacherous Clytemnestra killed as she clung to me. Well, Cassandra is a war bride. She's a war prize. Agamemnon brings home this young woman who is, of course, a threat to Clytemnestra. She's Clytemnestra's thinking, oh, he's got the trophy wife, and he's gonna distance me. He's gonna sort of kick me out of the picture. Cassandra is an interesting character because she is also she's gifted with prophecy, but no one believes her. She's gifted and she's also cursed. So she says things, and they're very prophetic. So when the audience hears what Cassandra has to say, it sounds pretty ominous because she's like telling the future, but no one in the Greek stories believes her. There's something about the way she says these things that make her incomprehensible. So Agamemnon is killed, and he says, truly, there's nothing more terrible or shameless than a woman who can contemplate such acts, planning and executing a husband's murder. I had thought that I'd be welcomed by my house and my children, but she, with her mind intent on final horror, has brought shame on herself and on all future women, even those who are virtuous, right? So Agamemnon, of course, being the sort of solipsist, being the narcissist, thinks, oh, if it happened to me, then everyone's guilty, right? It's not just Clytemnestra, it's all women, right? Well, Odysseus is too smart to really, take him in his words, but he has to maybe think about, like, what's going to happen when he gets home to Ithaca. What kind of a Penelope is he going to find? Is she going to be like a Clytemnestra, right? Agamemnon says to him further, don't be too open with your wife. Don't tell her every thought in your mind. Reveal a part, but keep the rest to yourself, right? But no, not to worry that death will come to you from Penelope, right? Who is so tender-hearted and circumspect. No, she's not going to be that. She's not that kind of a person, right? A newly wedded bride she was when we left for the war, with a baby son at her breast, who now must be a man and prospering. So, again, another indication that we know that Telemachus was still breastfeeding when Odysseus left, and now it's 20 years. So Telemachus must be 21, maybe edging 22. Agamemnon, the ghost of Agamemnon, continues, oh, his loving father will see him when he returns, and he will kiss his father as is right and proper. But that wife of mine did not even allow me to set eyes on my son before she killed me. So what happened to Agamemnon is a model, is a pattern that is told both to Odysseus here and has also been told to Odysseus' son Telemachus during the course of Telemachus' wanderings, right? During Telemachus' wanderings, he heard from Menelaus and from Nestor, two of the heroes of the Trojan War, that this terrible thing happened to Agamemnon. And Agamemnon's son, when the time was right, took the opportunity to exact vengeance. Agamemnon's son Orestes slew Aegisthus, who murdered his father, but also slew his own mother, right? This became a problem for us. It drove him mad. I mean, poor Orestes was caught between two commandments, right? Honor thy father and thy mother, essentially, right? But then avenge the murder of your parents, right? How do you avenge the murder of your parents and honor your parents when one of your parents has murdered the other, right? It's a lot of conundrum. and it drives him crazy. And it's only after the intervention of Athena, after he is tormented by this, that he actually can recover some kind of sanity. So anyway, the pattern, right, is the pattern of Agamemnon's fate is kind of behind the story. It lends this suspicion, like, what are you going to find when you finally get home? Are you going to find that family that's waiting to embrace you with open arms, or are you going to find a family that is setting traps, right? So it must make Odysseus at least a little bit uncertain, right, about what he's going to face. So when he parts from Agamemnon, he says, do you know about my son Orestes? Maybe Orestes is still alive. And Odysseus says, well, I really can't answer, so I'm not going to make a guess of it. And so Agamemnon is not completely happy. The only happiness or sadness you can have as a ghost in the Greek underworld, right, is hearing news about your family. If they're doing well, and if your sons have had success in war, you walk away happy. If things are bad, you walk away sad. And that's pretty much the life of a ghost. The next person that he meets is Achilles. And Achilles is very different in the underworld. He says, Odysseus, what an amazing mind you have, right? How did you manage to descend into Hades, where live the heedless dead, disembodied ghosts of men? And he explains why he had to go to consult Tiresias, but he also says, I haven't gotten back to Greece, Achilles. Haven't set foot on my land, but have had endless troubles. Yet no man has been more blessed than you, Achilles, nor will there be in time, since we Argives, we Greeks, considered you a god while you were alive. And now you rule a power among the unliving. In other words, Achilles, when he died, retained some of his status, right? And so, oddly enough, Odysseus says to Achilles, don't grieve at your own death. It's like, don't be so sad that you're dead, because it's for you, Achilles, you got it pretty good here, right? And that's from a living person to a dead person. And Achilles isn't really buying it. He says, glorious Odysseus, don't try to reconcile me to my dying. I'd rather serve as another man's laborer, as a poor peasant without land, and be alive on earth, than be lord of all the lifeless dead. It would be better to be the lowest person, on earth than the highest person in Hades. Why? Because Achilles lives through his body, and he cannot use his body as a spirit. He's just a ghost. So Achilles says, give me news of my son. Did he follow me to war? Did he become a leader? Tell me also about my father, Peleus. Is he still honored among the Myrmidons? Because old age ties him hand and foot. Do they fail to honor them, to honor him? I'm no longer up there in the sunlight with the strength that I had on Troy's wide plain when I killed the flower of their hosts to defend the Argives, right? He's very sad that he, that his whole existence was through his body, and he can't do anything now. If I could only return strong to my father's house for a single hour, I would give those who abuse him and his honor cause to regret the power of my invincible hands. The reference to the hands of Achilles brings us right back to book 24 of the Iliad, when Priam grasps Achilles' hands and kisses his hands, and that famous scene where Priam says, I'm doing something that no mortal could bring himself to do. I'm kissing the hands of the man who killed so many of my children. So Achilles, while he can do nothing, can still boast. And he puts this thought into Odysseus's head that you who are still alive there's an urgency. You have a duty to get back home and defend your father. If you know that your father is being, persecuted by these suitors, if you know that he's miserable because no one's defending him, you gotta help him out. So then it comes time for Odysseus to answer Achilles. And he says, truly, I have heard nothing about your father, faultless Peleus, but I can tell you about your son, Neoptolemus, your resolute son, since you commanded me. I myself brought him from the island of Skyros, right? Odysseus brought him to join the Greek army after the death of Achilles. And when we debated our plans before Troy, he was always the first to speak, and his words were eloquent. Only godlike Nestor and I were more so. So he was a good speaker. And when we fought with our bronze spears on the plains of Troy, he never lagged behind in the crowded ranks, but always advanced far in the lead, yielding to no one in skill. So a speaker of words and a doer of deeds is the kind of model for the Greek hero. In fact, we didn't read it, but Phoenix says this to Achilles in Book 9 of the Iliad when he's trying to persuade Achilles to come back into the fight. Phoenix says to Achilles, your father Peleus sent me along with you to watch over you and to instruct you and to make you a speaker of words and a doer of deeds. Right? You can't really be a hero, a full-on hero, if you're not good at giving and sharing your thoughts in counsel, right? And that's what Ajax. That's where Ajax is perhaps lacking. Even if not really in reality, Ajax is lacking in terms of reputation. Ajax is not a speaker, right? But Achilles is very happy to hear this good news about his son. He says he's killed many, numberless people. Your son Neoptolemus is killed in the war, right? And next to noble Memnon, who is the king of Ethiopia, Neoptolemus was the most handsome man I ever saw, says Odysseus. And then again, when we climbed into the horse, the Trojan horse, when we finally sacked the city, and it fell upon me to open the hatch, Odysseus says, when we got down from the horse, right? He was eager to get out and be the first one down, and so he was really the first out of the gate. And when Achilles hears all this stuff about his son, he's very happy, and he went away with great strides through the fields of Asphodel, rejoicing at my news of his son's greatness. Right? Achilles now can't get any glory for himself. He's completely he can only be satisfied, if at all, with news of his son's good success and reputation. And then comes the ghost of Ajax. Now, Ajax and Odysseus did not part friends. When Achilles died, his mother Thetis offered the arms of Achilles as a prize, the beautiful shield that we described, right, from the shield that Hephaestus had created with the two cities on it. The prize went to Odysseus, and he says, I wish I had never won that reward or that debate, that armor that caused the earth to close over so noble a head as that of Ajax, who in beauty and martial action and military action was supreme among the Danaans, save for that faultless son of Peleus, right? Ajax was the number 2 soldier. And because of that debate and that contest, Ajax, lost his life. How did he lose his life? Well, I told you the story in a previous lecture that he could not deal with the fact that the Greek army valued Odysseus's contributions to the war more than they valued Ajax's contributions. And so he went mad. He tried, or he thought he was killing all of the Greek soldiers, but Athena had confused him, and he ended up slaughtering only the sheep. And when he regained his sanity, when he regained his clear vision, he saw what he had done, and he saw that he'd become sort of a laughingstock because he'd done something insane and not particularly glorious. He just butchered a bunch of animals. So he took his own life using the sword of Hector. So when Odysseus talks to him, he knows that he's not going to have a receptive listener. Ajax, son of faultless Telamon, even in death, can you not forget your anger with me over those fatal weapons? The gods themselves must have cursed the Greeks with them. In you, a tower of strength was lost to us, and we Achaeans never cease to share as great a grief for you as we do for Achilles. Like, we still miss you just as much as we miss Achilles. But Zeus alone is to blame. Zeus, whose deadly hatred for the Greek host, hasten your doom. Come closer to me, my lord, so you can hear my speech. Curb your wrath, right? Restrain your proud spirit. Odysseus says, please, now you're dead. Everything's over. Can you just, can we be reconciled, right? And Ajax chose not to give a single word in answer, but he went away to join the ghosts of the dead. For all his anger, he might still have spoken to me, or I to him, but my heart desired to see other ghosts of those who were gone. Right? So this is a very sort of mean-spirited thing for Odysseus to say, and it really, it's another indication of his arrogance. He was pleading with Ajax. He wanted reconciliation. And when Ajax refused him, Odysseus said, whatever, I've got other people to see. I've got places to go and people to see, right? Ajax, of course, being a man of few words here, is a man of extremely few words. It kind of wraps up the loose ends of the Iliad, Ajax, all of the glory that he won in battle is sort of undone by the way he died. People people are going to tell the story of his suicide more than they're going to tell the story of anything else that he did. And it's sad that these three characters kind of are stacked together in a very similar way that we had in book 9 of the Iliad, when they go to Achilles and they try to persuade him. You have a sort of a series of relationships. Louis is asking, did Dante take inspiration? I think he certainly thought of this similar pattern. But also, Dante's Inferno is so much more complex. So yeah, I mean, it definitely, this would be the great model for Dante. But the other model is book 6 of the Aeneid, which we'll read sort of at the end of the course, where Virgil, who was of course Dante's guide, in the Inferno. Virgil tells us the story of Aeneas going into the underworld and meeting with his own father, Anchises. And Aeneas sees the whole sort of panorama of Roman history. He sees 2,000 years of Roman history go by, and his father's explaining to him, all that's going on. That's sort of more a direct source of inspiration. The Odyssey inspired Virgil, and Virgil inspired Dante, right? So I mean, Virgil inspired Dante so much that Dante uses Virgil as a character. Good question. Lots of other mythological heroes and famous people are there, and Heracles, who's, interestingly enough, his story is not a big part of the Iliad and the Odyssey. He's such a huge part of Greek mythology. So many shrines to Heracles. He is considered the closest to the gods of all the mortals, right? Son of Zeus and Alcmene. He actually goes to live on Olympus after he dies. Yes, someone's raised a hand. Was that Louis? What's up?
Yeah, Professor, I had a quick question. So I had a history of religion class a little while back.
Yeah.
And we were made to understand that hell as a concept was more a desolate place where nothing happens. So kind of sort of like purgatory, right? Except it was like this dusty place, and that comes from like Hebrew tradition, like original Hebrew.
Well, tradition. Yeah, I mean, you have the sort of the pit of Sheol, right, where it's it's not really described as anything but just a horrible kind of like a place that you fall into and you're kind of forgotten. In the underworld in Greek mythology, you have very distinct places where there are some awful things and some people are being punished down there. Ixion is tied to his wheel, and Sisyphus is rolling that rock up the hill, and Tantalus is doomed to eternal thirst, and he can't get a drink of water. People are being punished down there, to be sure, but there's also a place, the Elysian Fields, where the heroes go and they just enjoy kind of like sunshine. It's like, it's a nice, quiet, beautiful place. It's like a retirement village almost, right? And that's where we hear, like, the old warriors who are basically, free of any kind of terrible crime or guilt. That's where they go. And it's alluded to here, not really that strongly, but it's when Ajax goes away, he goes off into the fields of asphodel, this grass, that is very commonly seen in Greece, this, like clover, if you will. And that's the Elysian Fields. It's like you just hang out there, and you enjoy the weather, and you enjoy each other's company, kind of thing. So yeah, so it's more complicated. The Greek picture is a little more complicated, as far as the underworld. So at any rate, the why didn't Hades live on Mount Olympus? Well, so in Hesiod, the three brothers who come at kind of this particular generation of, giants and titans, the three brothers who end up dividing the world between them are Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades. And the way that they divide is that um, Zeus gets Olympus and the sky, Poseidon gets the earth and the sea, and Hades gets what's underneath the earth. So they kind of like divide the universe in strata, like, and Zeus, because he's kind of highest up, has a bit more perhaps authority, even though they're supposed to be equal, these three brothers. That's why, when Poseidon gets angry at Odysseus, it can't really be easily undone. Zeus can't really go against his brother that way. And so at the end of book 11, just an odd thing happens. A character called Elpenor, who happened to have just had a fall off of a roof, and he dies, but his body's not buried, so Odysseus has to bury his body. So the ghost of Elpenor comes back, but so in the middle of telling a story to the Phaeacians, Odysseus neatly kind of ties up the story of the Trojan War, and kind of his, sort of the centrality of his role in the lives of the great heroes. It's, he's like saying, I met all the great ones, and I knew Agamemnon, and we had a lot to do with each other, and I knew Achilles, and I knew Ajax, and all that kind of thing. And of course, it impresses the Phaeacians. And in the next book, he's ready to go back. The Phaeacians give him a boat. Everything looks fine. But Odysseus tells of how he ended up with on the island of Calypso. But when they finally bring him back, right? Sadly enough, they land on Ithaca, and the Phaeacians have made Poseidon very angry because they've helped Odysseus. So the Earthshaker Poseidon had not forgotten his past threats against God like Odysseus, and he asked Zeus what Zeus intended. He said, even I, Father Zeus, will no longer be honored by the deathless God, since mortals honor me not at all. Phaeacians too, who, as you well know, are descended from me. I said not long ago that Odysseus should suffer before he reached home, though I never denied that he might return once you promised it and confirmed it with a nod. I mean, I don't deny his getting back, but I wanted him to have a hard time getting back. But these men, these Phaeacians, they've carried him over the sea in their swift ship, and they've set him down on Ithaca, and they've given him all these gifts, bronze, golds, fabric, and all this stuff, even more stuff than he would have brought from Troy if he had come directly, right, with his share of the spoils. So these people are kind of undoing my plan, these ungrateful Phaeacians who are actually my descendants, says Poseidon. They're undoing my plan to make Odysseus miserable. And here you have Poseidon kind of playing like he's not quite up to the level, he's not quite up to the rank of Zeus. It's like Zeus is a 4-star general, but seems like Poseidon's maybe only a 3-star general. And so, but Zeus treats him, as an equal. He says, "Oh, what a thing to say, powerful earth shaker! The gods never fail to honor you. It would be a wretched thing indeed to lack respect for the oldest and the greatest. I mean, come on, we're the top dogs here, right? But if any man intoxicated by strength and power fails to honor you in any way, you're free to take your revenge however you want to do it. Do what you wish and as it pleases you." And Poseidon says, "Well, I don't want to offend you, Zeus, but this is what I intend to do. I intend to strike the Phaeacian ship as she returns home from her voyage, to warn them not to go about helping people when they're not supposed to. And I'll ring their city with a vast mountain chain. In other words, like they will now be cut off from the rest of the world, right?" And Zeus says, do what you like, right? Wait till all the eyes of the city are on the ship as she sails swiftly to port, and then turn her into stone, right? Like a reef, like a coral reef, in the shape of a ship, so that everyone sees that this sort of miracle has happened, and it's not a happy thing, right? The ship kind of turns into stone, and then put a city around their, I'm sorry, put a wall of mountain around their city, and they will no longer be a part of human history. So Odysseus, in fact, maybe indirectly, but by his association with the Phaeacians, has brought about their destruction or their obliteration from world history. They're not all destroyed, right? I mean, Poseidon doesn't destroy Phaeacia and the people in it, but he closes them off from the rest of the world. He makes them essentially irrelevant, right? And that's again Odysseus, the destroyer of cities. And so we never hear about them again. And of course, he's not going to be able to tell very convincing stories about them because no one will ever be able to find them again. So before we break, we just want to look at this one passage of Odysseus, who's now in book 13, a little bit past the halfway point of the Odyssey. He's now back home in Ithaca. He's finally made it home. And you would think like this is the resolution to his problem, to his story, right? But no. In fact, when he gets there, he's asleep, and he's more or less in total panic when he gets up because in his own country, Odysseus woke. After his long absence, he failed to recognize where he was. For the goddess Athena had veiled him in a mist so she might make him seem like a stranger and be his guide. So he's not only not familiar of what he's looking at, like he doesn't see the landscape, he doesn't know this place where he was king. No one is going to know him either, right? Everything looks strange to him. Those long ridge tracks, the safe anchorages, the safe harbors, right? The sheer cliffs and the verdant trees. This is not what you expect. When Odysseus returns home, you expect the nostalgia. You expect the beloved place where I did this, and my favorite lookout place here, and I love to fish over here. All of the familiar places are now completely foreign to him. He is an absolutely foreign being in his native land. He leaps to his feet, and he stood staring about his native land, and then he struck his thighs with the flat of his hands. In other words, he slapped his thighs, and he groaned, and he said, "Alas, what mortal country have I reached? Are they lawless, uncivilized people here? Or are they kind to strangers, minds fearful of the gods? Shall I carry these riches, the stuff that the Phaeacians gave me? Shall I carry these riches with me, or should I merely explore? Should I bury them here somewhere so Maybe no one will find them. And he says, I wish I'd stayed with the Phaeacians. I wish I'd stayed there, right? Because look, they put me into danger. Now, where can I hide all this wealth? If I leave it here, it'll be lost as a spoil to others. Oh, those Phaeacian counselors and leaders
Yeah.
were not quite so wise and just as they seemed. They said they would take me to Ithaca, but they lied, and they brought me here to this strange land. May Zeus, the god of suppliants who watches over us, punish them, right? He's totally in the dark as to where he is. And it's very reminiscent of what he said in the beginning of book 6 when he lands on Phaeacia and he meets with Nausicaa, the princess. You know, he's just saved himself from almost drowning, and he's in book 6. It's like he's got, you know, all these scrapes and bruises, and he's naked and, you know, covered in salt and stuff. And he was sleeping under a bunch of leaves. And when morning breaks and he gets up, Odysseus is like, "Where am I?" You know, it's like, are there people here who are savages? Like, are they going to kill me? You know, how do I appeal to people? Do I, you know, how am I going to sort of communicate with them? And you don't expect that when he gets home that he's going to have the same reaction. That he's basically, it's like he's in a totally, you know, foreign place. So it emphasizes the fact that Odysseus is, and at the same time is not, of this place, right? He is the king of this place, but he's also in a sense the destroyer of this place, and he is alienated from his own home, right? um and it takes Athena to sort of help him out of this predicament. She has to, you know, sort of say, why are you why are you so hesitant? Why don't you sort of suck it up and go exploring, right? And he has to ask her. You know, she comes disguised as a shepherd. You know, a good looking young man, shepherd. He's not as like, you know, he's dressed in good nice clothing, maybe more than you'd expect for a shepherd, but clearly that's what he is. And Odysseus, of course, doesn't know him. So Odysseus says, "Hail to you, friend, the first person I've come across. I hope you don't have any malicious intent against me. I hope you'll help and protect me, since I beg you, as if you were a god." Right? Tell him this is now like he did with Nausicaa. He needs help, right? He's in a strange place. So he asks the disguised Athena, "Tell me clearly so I can be certain. What country is this? What race? What kind of men live here? Is it some offshore island or some fertile headland sloping to the sea?" He doesn't even know. You know, he's looking out on the sea from a hill, but he doesn't even know if he's on an island or the mainland. And Athena says, "Stranger, you must be from some far off place, or else maybe you're stupid if you have to ask the name of this place. It's by no means unknown. Many people have heard of it. Many of those who live towards the rising sun, people way out in the east, people who live way out in the west. It is a rugged place, yes, unfit for horses, you know, yet narrow as it is not destitute. It has its charms, it has its wealth. It carries crops in plenty and good vineyards, and never lacks in rain. And it's good for grazing for cattle. All kinds of trees, springs, lots of fresh water. So Ithaca's name has spread even as far as Troy, stranger, and they say that it's a long way from Archaea. So finally, Odysseus looks up and he says, "Oh, um, I'm home." But he doesn't come clean to Athena. He makes believe that he's a sort of a wanderer from Crete, right? He says, "Oh, I've heard of Ithaca even in Crete, and now I came here with my wealth. Probably he wanted to trade or something. He wanted to go into business. He wanted to trade his wealth, and I got a lot of wealth back home behind with my children. And I'm also a bad guy. I'm a bad dude. I had to flee after killing this guy Orsilochus, the brave son of Idomeneus, the king of Crete." Right? In spacious Crete, he could run faster than any other mortal, any other eater of bread. He it was who tried to steal these hard-won spoils from Troy. Um, but no, I took my vengeance on him, and so I'm a wealthy guy. I'm an important guy. I'm a guy you don't want to mess with. He's saying all this stuff, Odysseus, he's lying about all the stuff to Athena. And Athena's like, you know what? It sure is you. It's my old pal Odysseus, right? Um, she smiled at him, and touching him with her hand, she altered her form so that she now becomes like Athena, glorious female figure. And she said, even if a god encountered you, he would need to be wily, he'd need to be clever, and devious to outdo your cunning. Resolute man, stubborn in counsel, never tiring of intrigue, even in your own country, you will always be full of guile and the lying tales you love so much. Odysseus is, let's face it, a pathological liar, right? And Athena kind of likes this about him. I guess because it makes his life so interesting, and it sort of makes it interesting for her, vicariously, to watch him get in and out of all these situations. But and she said, I tricked you too, because you should have known it was me, Athena, who's always watching over you. And so yes, Louis, the gods are all kind of toxic because they play with people like they're like chess pieces. Absolutely. And it's hard to forgive the gods this stuff. So and so Odysseus is home, but now he's going to have to rely on his ability to lie and to sort of um, you know disguise himself, um, because it's not a home that is welcoming to him. Turns out Agamemnon had something with that warning about, watch out when you get home, people may be waiting for you. In this case, it's not his wife, but it's the suitors, right? So it's dangerous. Being at home for Odysseus is dangerous. So she says to him, "Look, be strong. I'll help you, but tell no man, no one, man or woman, that it's you back from your wanderings. But suffer your troubles in silence. Endure the insults that someone will offer. If they treat you badly, just sort of have to deal with it, right?" Um, and um, Odysseus says, "Well, I do believe it's you, Athena. But still, I ask you in your father's name, in Zeus' name, since no, I don't believe that I've actually gotten home. I don't believe that I'm in Ithaca. Tell me, promise me that this is not some foreign land, that you're toying with me. You're trying to confuse my mind. Tell me if I'm back, truly back in my own country." Um, "That's the way you always think," bright-eyed Athena replied. "That must be why I don't abandon you to your sorrows. You are always so courteous, so intelligent, and so cautious. Any other man back from his wanderings would have rushed to the palace to see his wife and children, but you don't care to know a thing until you've tested your wife further." "Oh yeah, she's still there in the palace, weeping with while the sad days and nights wane. Um, um, as for me," Athena says, "I knew, no doubt, you would reach home, but losing all your companions. Um, but know this, I was not prepared to fight my own uncle Poseidon, whose heart was filled with anger when you blinded his son." Right? This Athena is saying, you made it hard for me. Um, Goddess though I am, I actually had to go against the will of Poseidon, who is a greater god than she is. So come then, I'll show you the island of Ithaca so that you will know." And then she starts pointing out to him, "There is the harbor of Phorcys, the old man of the sea. And there at its head is the long-leaved olive tree with that shadowy cave nearby, sacred to the nymphs." She's telling Odysseus um, where he lives. I mean, she's saying like, this is all stuff that he should have known as being born and raised there, right? And now he starts to kind of break down. He starts to see and recognize his country, but it took all of this time for him to make um, to make contact, in the sense of to recognize fully his own country. It just shows you how alienated he is from this place. So and that's and then Athena will promises to help, and you see Odysseus sort of here in this etching, this Renaissance era um, Dutch etching of the story. You see Odysseus kissing the ground, and Athena kind of pointing, and she's pointing to something that's going to happen. a meeting that's going to happen in a very humble place, in a hut, where Odysseus will meet up with his old swineherd Eumaeus. And that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. Athena disguises him, makes him look like an old man. He loses his hair, he stoops over, he looks like he's had a lot of hard years on him. And now the disguised Odysseus is going to try to re-enter and reestablish himself at home. He's not coming home as himself. He's coming home lying and looking like somebody he's not, right? Because he's afraid of being home. This is not exactly what we expected. Okay, so we will take a break now, and we'll come back and we will do book 14. So let's say it's 9:03. So I'm going to pause the recording till about 9:13. All right. Stopping the screen share and pausing. Okay, we're back. Tacked a couple of extra minutes onto the break there. So we are now going to plunge into one more book of the Odyssey, book 16, book 14. And we'll probably have enough there to take us on into the end of the evening. Someone Joseph has asked, was the relationship between Athena and Odysseus like a mother to son, or was it like more like a person, like lovers, for instance? It's hard to say. I wonder, I've never really heard the analogy made of mother son or lover. She's so much the patron or patroness. But as we were saying before, there's a kind of a sense in which human beings are always playthings, for the gods. I would say maybe she's kind of like a sponsor, in the sense that Athena is the symbol of wisdom, and Odysseus is kind of like the way that wisdom is best represented among among the Greeks. So it's like, so Athena's like a totem, she's a totem for Odysseus. I can't seem to get this screen. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. Got it. All right, and we're going to have a breakout room in a minute, but I want to read. And I assume that a lot of people have not read this. I mean, people are reading bits and pieces, but I want to talk about Eumaeus. Odysseus followed a rough track from the harbor, leading through the woods and over the hills to the place where Athena had said that he would find the faithful swineherd, the most loyal of all the servants Odysseus had acquired. He found him indeed sitting in the yard in front of his hut, which was built high up on a site with a wide view in a broad yard in the center of a clearing. The swineherd had constructed it himself to hold his absent master's swine, without his mistress's or old Laertes' knowledge. He laid huge stones and topped the walls with a hedge of thorn. Beyond them, he had set large, close-set stakes, sticks of wood, on each side, oak stakes, from oak tree, split to the black heart of the tree, so they're nice and thick. And then he built 12 sties, like pigsties, where you keep your pigs, close together inside the yard to hold the pigs. And there were 50 breeding sows, sow, female pig, wallowing there in each. The boars, the males, slept outside, and there were far fewer of these, since the noble suitors had thinned out their number with their feasting. The swineherd sending them the pick of the fatted hogs. There were 360, guarded by 4 hounds, fierce as wolves, reared by the master swineherd. So let's do a breakout room. And my question is, what is your initial impression of this swineherd, this guy who keeps the pigs, right? What's your initial impression of him? and how do you expect his character is going to evolve as the story goes? And let's do the breakout room. So that, can I do it from this screen, or do I have to stop the oh no, I can do it from here, right? Breakout rooms, 5 minutes, creating 6 rooms, 5 rooms, I think would be good. Let's do 6 rooms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in a room, more or less. Okay. Okay, here we go. 5 minutes. And talk about Eumaeus. I'll put the question in the chat. What's your initial impression of his of this character, and how do you think this character will evolve as the story goes forward? Here we go. Okay, hopefully we're all back. And I've just discovered something which I probably should have figured out a while ago, that I can easily take your attendance during breakout rooms. And so now I only have to call out the names of people who I didn't see. And it seems like 30 or so of the 35 of us were here. So what I'd like is for some people to type in some ideas into the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to call out some names. Is Yemisrach Abera here? No. How about Michael Chata? How about Safre Hughes? Again, don't worry if I'm not calling your name, it's because I got your name from the chat, so don't worry about it. How about Kermina Khalil? How about Peter Manj Galadze? Okay. How about Eslam Mohammed? If you hear your name, just unmute. How about Victoria Nicholas? Okay. Rachel Tuachi. And Jaron Walls. Okay, so I guess I was on target then. Everybody else is here, which is good. Let's see what's in the chat. Capable, welcoming, he scolds Odysseus, but then welcomes him. He's a loyal friend. After 20 years, he constructed this. He's apparently very crafty. Nicholas, I got you from the you're good. I got you from the breakout room. Close friend. He's a servant of Odysseus, to be sure. But so here he's a servant. He's an enslaved person. He's loyal. He's loyal, but he also gives over food to the suitors. He has a mythical number of pigs. It's like 360 is surprisingly like the number of days in the year. I mean, it's sort of a magical number. And so there's the sense of like, everything is permanent and stable in his little world. We'll learn that, he lives far away from the city, because if you know anything about pig farms, they're always far away from populations because they're pretty stinky and unpleasant. So he's furthest away from the city, yet he's the most loyal. He's very very good with his hands and very welcoming. He's sort of self-sufficient. He's like this guy who seems to be doing just fine without any government, without any guidance from a king. He himself was trimming a piece of well-tanned oxhide and shaping a pair of sandals for his feet, while 3 of his men had gone out. He's got other men, and he's in charge of other men, right? Even though he's a slave. Gone out in different directions, driving the swine, and a 4th man delivered a boar to the arrogant suitors so they might enjoy the flesh. A considerable character, right? And Odysseus should be at the opposite end of him, socioeconomically, right? King versus slave. But the tables here are in a way turned, and it's the servant who is going to give Odysseus the welcome, even though Odysseus is home in his own land. It's the servant Eumaeus who's going to show him the hospitality. But there's so many pitiable things. I'm thinking of Odysseus as like, if Odysseus is a narcissist, then this part of the Odyssey is like Dante's Inferno, to use a reference that we came upon earlier. It's like the Dante's Inferno for narcissists. It's like the worst you can imagine. Here in his home, no one recognizes him, not even the dogs. Suddenly, the dogs barked at the sight of Odysseus and rushed at him, barking loudly. But he had the wit to sit down and drop his staff. Like, what do you do when being attacked by strange dogs? You drop down. All right. And he sort of put himself in like, made himself almost like a dog, like he's submitting. Even then, he might have been badly mauled in his own farmyard if the swineherd had not followed them swiftly, the leather falling from his hand, the shoe that he was working on, and hurried to the gateway, calling out to the dogs and scattering them with a shower of stones. Like, he's threw some pebbles at them. Then he addressed his master, and of course he doesn't know. He addressed his disguised master. Old man, these dogs could have torn your flesh in a moment, and you would have blamed me. As if the gods hadn't given me grief and pain enough, here I am fattening swine for other men to eat, while the godlike master I mourn for may be wandering in hunger through foreign cities and lands. That is, if he's still alive under the sun. But come to the hut with me, old man, and when you've quenched your hunger and your thirst, you can tell me where you come from and all the troubles you've suffered. This is real Xenia. This is real hospitality. First, you offer the comforts of food and shelter, and then you can ask the person, right, what they who they are and where they come from and what their problems in life are. But the dog's not recognizing him is so telling. Just another way of the poems underscoring that he is so alienated in his own house. And Eumaeus here, in just a few lines, there's a lot of exposition. It's very sort of formalized to this speech. It tells you not only about Eumaeus, but about his loyalty to his master and his worry about his master, even though he doesn't know if his master is alive or not. And with this, the faithful swineherd led his way to the hut, and he ushered Odysseus in, then sat him down after making brushwood, and then he even, Odysseus even sort of gives prayer to Zeus, right? He was glad of his reception, and he thanked him, saying, "May Zeus and the other gods give you your heart's desire, since you welcome me so warmly." And Eumaeus says, "Well, it would be wrong for me to turn a guest away, because our tradition is not to do that. Even someone who looks worse than you, right? Since every beggar and stranger is from Zeus, and a gift, though small, from such folk as us is welcome. We can't give much because we're poor, we're servants, but we can give a little. Small it must be, since it is the servant's lot, always living in fear of the masters who lord it over them. I mean, young masters like ours, these suitors. The gods have thwarted my old master's homecoming. He would have cared for me with kindness and given me things of my own. He would have given me a hut and a piece of land and a wife worthy of having been courted by many men. Things that a kind master grants a servant who has labored on his behalf and whose efforts the gods favor. Just as they further my efforts here, my master would have rewarded me well, indeed, had he grown old here in Ithaca, but he has perished. As I wish that Helen and all of her race had utterly perished, since she was the death of many a fine warrior. He, that is to say, Odysseus, went to Ilium, famed for its horses, while all the other warriors to fight those Trojans on Agamemnon's voyage of vengeance. This was a silly war, right? Yes, a wife being worthy of being courted by many men. In other words, like someone who rates pretty high. It's a very kind of like a very masculine kind of a rating, right? He does what he can to make life comfortable for this old beggar, the disguised Odysseus, and talks about how the suitors are eating Odysseus's possessions away every day more and more. And Odysseus kind of does what he does best. He starts lying. He starts spinning out a story. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I've heard of Odysseus. I've been wandering around, but I've definitely heard of your master." And Eumaeus replies, "You don't need to do that, old man. No traveler's tale will satisfy Odysseus's wife or his brave son. In fact, every beggar in need of a meal invents some lie at random, not caring if it's true. I mean, if you're going to sing for your supper, if you're going to tell jokes for your supper, or come, tell some interesting stories. Like we've got plenty of people who wander in and do that. Whoever reaches Ithaca in his wanderings goes to my mistress and deceives her with his stories." So Odysseus, who's like the master liar, now is sort of like a dime a dozen, right? Um, she welcomes them all. Penelope welcomes them all in her kindness. She shows them hospitality. She questions them endlessly, while she weeps, as women do when their husbands die far off, tears streaming from her eyes. You too would invent a tale fast enough, old man, if it brought you a tunic and a cloak. I mean, if you could talk your way into a few little gifts that you might be able to use, a new set of clothes, you would come up with something, right? But Eumaeus says, don't talk to me about Odysseus. I know that as for my master, his spirit has flown by now, and the dogs and birds have stripped his flesh from his limbs, or the fishes have had him. He might have drowned. He might not have died on the battlefield, and his bones are veiled in sand on some deep shore. He has perished far off and left his friends to grieve. And I, most of all, since however far I travel, I'll never find so good a master, not even if I reached my parents' house, that place where I was born and where they raised me. Much as I grieve for them, eager though I am to see them and visit my native land again, longing instead for the lost, Odysseus grips me. Even though he's not here, stranger, I am ashamed to merely name him, so greatly did he love and care for me. Rather, I will call him noble friend, though he, Odysseus, the absent Odysseus, cannot hear me. And naturally, Odysseus is in fact right there in disguise hearing it. So here's Eumaeus saying that he feels he's been adopted into Odysseus's family so profoundly is this connection, right? He's kind of establishing that for Odysseus, that that he's totally trustworthy. He was taken from his parents and enslaved, and yet as much as he loves his parents, he feels a greater attachment to Odysseus. So it's sort of a foreshadowing that the natural relationships between parents and children can be severed and replaced by other people who are more present in one's life. For instance, what's going to happen when Telemachus walks into the scene? When Telemachus walks into the scene of Odysseus and Eumaeus, it's going to be that Telemachus recognizes Eumaeus as his father, as someone who's sort of been there while he's growing up, right? Odysseus is just some old guy who just wandered in yesterday, right? I mean, he's a nobody, right? And Odysseus is forced to look upon the reunion and the love that transpires between Eumaeus and Telemachus. And that, if you were going to punish a narcissist, and especially the narcissist that Odysseus is, where his whole identity is tied up with being the father of Telemachus, if you're going to punish him, that's the most exquisite, painful punishment, right? To make him realize that someone else has usurped his role as a father, has raised his child for him, has kind of negated his whole existence, right? Because Narcissus wants to throw his existence over everything, and here he's like he's kind of dissolved into nothing. But what is he doing? He's spinning out a story, spinning out a story about being from Crete, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, Louis, what's up?
Man, I don't really see that as a punishment. Who better of a man to take care of somebody's son than somebody who's extremely loyal? I think the punishment would have been his son growing up without any male figure and then coming to hate Odysseus for leaving his family behind.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I think what I'm thinking of the punishment that Odysseus is feeling, not Telemachus. Telemachus, has benefited, no doubt. Even though he's very sad about Odysseus not being there, Telemachus has benefited. but thinking of Odysseus and his fixation on coming home to his family, and he's completely cut out of it, right? From Odysseus' point of view, it's just awful, right? But yeah, no, there's no doubt that Eumaeus and Telemachus have enjoyed this wonderful bond. So the rest of this book actually is taken up with this big lie that Odysseus spins out. He'll just keep going on and on, telling this tale. And Eumaeus is like, wow, you've really told quite the story, but but I don't think what you say of Odysseus can be true, and it won't convince me. Why, given your circumstances, you lie pointlessly. As far as my master's homecoming is concerned, I don't have any hope. I think he's been destroyed. Probably they didn't let him die fighting the Trojans in the arms of his friend when the war had ended. He was robbed not only of his life but even of his glory. He might have left his son a famous name. The army would have built a tomb for him, but as it is, he's dead and forgotten. And so the Odysseus is trying to convince him. It's like, okay, I'll tell you what. You may not believe me, but let's make a bet. Let's strike a bargain, and let the Olympian gods be our witness. Let Zeus and the rest of them. If your master returns home, then give me a tunic and a cloak and send me off to where I'm going, the next island over, Dulichium. But if he should not return, despite my prophecy, then you can throw me off a cliff, right? I don't care. Just do anything you want with me. So of course Odysseus is a cheater, right? I mean, he knows he's coming home because he's already home. So he's making Eumaeus, he's making a bet, which is like stacked. The dice are loaded here, right? I mean, Odysseus knows. It's hard for Eumaeus to really deal with him. Oh yes, said the swineherd, that would be a fine way indeed to win glory among men, right? To turn murderer. You're asking me if you're wrong, I should throw you off a cliff? That would make me a murderer. And rob you of your precious life after I've taken you into my house and played the host? No, that's just silly. He says, come, it's time to eat. I trust that my friends will be here soon and we can have a pleasant meal. And then they have supper. They entertain him very nicely, bring the nicest hog, and etc. And Odysseus once again says, Eumaeus, may Father Zeus be kind. You give me the best cut of meat. You've treated me like the guest of honor. And Eumaeus said, eat, my pious guest, enjoy whatever is here. It's the god who gives one thing and holds back another, since he has the power to do as he wishes. He's very much, Eumaeus is the wise man. He's like, well, we have this now, let's enjoy it now, because you never know what Zeus is going to do, right? Yes, Louis, Eumaeus is, believe me, kind of everybody's favorite character. He's almost the Hector of the story. Think about it, Eumaeus has preserved what's left of Ithaca. He has been consistent in all the years of absence, even though he's got to sort of make his peace with the suitors. He's got to help them out to some extent, otherwise they're going to turn on him, they might kill him. So he's supplying the pigs, but he doesn't seem to have lost all of the property. It's kind of sustainable. He's providing them, but he seems to have enough still. And he is kind of the moral backbone of the story. Everything does, right, is very much Hector-like. First offers a portion to the immortal gods, makes a libation, he pours out a little wine, and then he placed the cup into the hands of that sacker of cities, Odysseus, and then only then did he sit down and eat his own meal. Then Odysseus starts to tell the story of Troy. And so much for that. Now, the next book is Telemachus finally returning to Pylos and coming home, and Eumaeus tells the story of how he was captured from his home, and it turns out that he was a nobleman, right? He was not a nobody. but because you're a war captive, you become a slave. So we'll skip that book because Telemachus walks in to Eumaeus's hut, and this is, to my mind, really the most beautiful scene. And I sort of sketched it out for you before, but now we should really read it and relish it. Back at the hut, Odysseus and the noble swineherd had lit a dawn fire, lit the fire. They were making breakfast. So Odysseus now is very much just a guest in the house of the slave. He's like not the king, he's a nobody. And he seems almost to be happy. And after sending off the other herdsmen to take care of the swine, Telemachus approaches. Guess what? The guard dogs fail to bark because they know him. The dogs grew up with Telemachus. Instead, they fawned around him. They wagged their tails and they went up to greet him and lick him. Odysseus, hearing the sound of footsteps and realizing that the dogs were silent, spoke to Eumaeus with winged words. This must be some friend of yours, Eumaeus, or an old acquaintance. I hear footsteps, but the dogs are quiet, fawning around your visitor. He had barely finished speaking when his own brave son stood on the threshold. The swineherd leapt up in amazement, and the bowls he was using to mix the glowing wine fell from his hands. His shock made him drop what he was holding. This will happen again when Eurycleia, the nurse, recognizes Odysseus. The bowls drop from her hands. It's the absolute shock of recognition and the joy of recognition, right? He ran to meet his master. In other words, Eumaeus ran to meet Telemachus, who is in fact the son of his master and effectively his master. And he kissed his forehead, his sparkling eyes, and his hands while the tears ran down his cheeks. The worthy swineherd clasped godlike Telemachus in his arms and kissed him endlessly, as if he were back from the dead, as a loving father greets a son returned from a far-off land after a 9-year absence, a dear and only son for whom he has suffered much pain. And in tears, he spoke to him with winged words. Telemachus, sweet light of my eyes, you are here, and I thought I would never see you more after you sailed for Pylos. Come in, dear boy, and let me gladden my heart by gazing at you. Home now from distant lands, and here in my house. You seldom visit the herdsmen and the farmers and the farm. You're always in town. I think you must enjoy watching that hateful crowd of suitors. Wise Telemachus replied, if you say so, old friend, I came here to see you, though, with my own eyes, and ask you whether my mother is still at home or whether some man has married her, leaving Odysseus's bed unslept in, hung with foul cobwebs. In other words, Telemachus has been away for a couple of weeks, and he's thinking that might have been just the time when no, Louis, don't worry about it. Eumaeus comes out fine. He's happy in the end. He's certainly not. He's the good guy through and through. So that is different than Hector. The good guy actually makes it out of this one. But right now we're looking at the impact, right, of the meeting, and just the richness of this language of a father and son bond, and Odysseus is just the observer. Telemachus is worried that his absence is at the critical time when Penelope would have made a decision to leave, and Eumaeus says, no, she's still sad, she's still weeping in the palace, etc. And only now, when Telemachus is making himself more comfortable, he enters the house. He's carrying a spear. It's like carry a weapon, that's normal. And they take the spear from him so that he can relax. And only now does his father Odysseus rise and get up from his seat to relinquish his chair, like his father Odysseus got up thinking, I have to give my chair to this boy, this young man. That is such a strong image of the succession of one generation from one generation to another, right? I mean, of course, Odysseus at some point is going to have to give up the kingship to his son. And that's what narcissists don't understand, right? At some point, a narcissist who is in power has to realize that he's going to die. and someone has to succeed him. And will there be a peaceful transfer of power? Will the people see that sovereignty has been transferred in a healthful way? Is Odysseus ready to do this? Will he ever be ready to do this? Will he ever be ready to step down so that Telemachus can take his place as king? Well, in this little image, Odysseus automatically gets up to relinquish his seat. But Telemachus said, no, sit down, friend. I'll find a seat somewhere else. Here's a man, pointing to the swineherd Eumaeus, who'll find one for me. I mean, he's the best host you can imagine. So Odysseus sits down again. The swineherd puts a fleece over another chair so that Telemachus, Odysseus' son, could sit down comfortably. And then they eat, and then they're looking at each other. And Telemachus looks at the old man and says, "Where did this guy come from? What ship brought him here to Ithaca? Who does he claim to be? What sailors brought him here?" And Odysseus, is going to stay with this lie about, being a wanderer from Crete. Eumaeus, the swineherd, you answered him. Remember, in the Iliad, we said when the narrator forms a very emotional bond with one of the characters and wants to sort of get the reader to feel that bond, the emotional, the heightened emotion, they switch to the second person. So when Patroclus is dying, Homer always says, "You, Patroclus, said the following," or "You, Patroclus, did this happen to you, Patroclus." Here it's Eumaeus, right? Eumaeus is getting this honor of the apostrophe, that referring to him in the second person. He says, "So this guy's saying that he's from Crete. He knows about your father, etc. But I'm going to just hand him over to you. You have to do with him as you wish, because after all, you, Telemachus, are the boss here, and he is your suppliant. He's not really begging from me because I'm your servant. He's begging from you." Wise Telemachus replied, "Eumaeus, your words cut me to the quick. How can I welcome a stranger to my own house? I'm still young and not strong enough to defend myself against anyone who picks a quarrel at random, and my mother's mind sways this way and that way, whether to stay, keep the house for me out of respect for my husband, for Odysseus's bed, and for public opinion, or to go with whoever proves to be the best of her suitors." Right? And she's always on the fence about this, or it seems to be that she is. In truth, regarding this stranger, since he's come to you, I will give him a tunic and a cloak. I'll give him a sword. I'll give him sandals. I'll give him, what he needs to continue his journey. Or perhaps you might make a deal with him so he can stay on the farm and take care of him. If you want to do that, I will make sure that you get clothes and food so that feeding him, his presence, doesn't ruin you, so that having another mouth to feed doesn't cost you anything, right? But I'll not let him mix with the crowd of suitors whose mindless insolence runs to excess, lest they taunt him and distress me. I can't protect him. This is a poor, broken down old guy. If he goes into the palace where these young, arrogant, galoots, these guys are feasting and drinking all day long, they're hard partying all day long, they're gonna, give him a hard time, and they're gonna, do something, they're gonna taunt him, and if I can't defend him, it's going to be bad for my reputation, right? It's hard for one man alone to do anything in a crowd, however brave he is, and they in fact have the greater strength, right? This knowledge of the suitors hurts Odysseus. He says, "Friend," he says, talking to his son here, "Friend, it's surely right for me to speak. It's painful for my heart to hear you describe the outrage that these suitors are committing in your house, despite you, a fine young man. Do you accept it? Do the people here hate you because of some oracle, or is it the fault of some brother whom a man should trust to fight for him in troubled times? I mean, is there no one to help you? I wish I had the youth to match my present feelings, or were myself a son of peerless Odysseus, or maybe even Odysseus himself returned from his travels, of which there's always some hope. Then some stranger would welcome to take my head if I failed to prove their bane. In other words, then I would gladly submit to like capital punishment if I didn't rise to the occasion, or I didn't help get rid of them when I reached the palace of Laertes' son Odysseus. And if they proved too many for a lone fighter, then if it were me, I'd rather die the death in my own palace than have to gaze forever at their wickedness. Odysseus is almost saying to his son, how can you let this happen? You say you're weak, you say one man can't stand up to them, but isn't it better to die fighting? How can you look upon, what's going on in your house? So is this Odysseus trying to rile his son up, trying to sort of get him going? It's Telemachus who has the moderation. It's Telemachus who is able to keep his cool no matter what Odysseus is taunting him with. He says, Telemachus, a stranger, let me confess the truth of the matter. On the whole, the people have no hatred for me or grudge against me, nor is it any fault of any brother that I don't have here. It's Zeus that has preserved our house in a strict line. This is the kingship. Laertes was the only son of his father, Arceisius. Odysseus, in turn, was the only son, and I am Odysseus' son. Odysseus had little joy of me because he left me behind as a child, and as a result, his house is full of enemies. So he, Telemachus, is saying that the line of kingship should succeed, should continue, with Telemachus being the new king if Odysseus isn't there. Yet the other strand in the story is that it's not so simple. It has something to do, at least something to do, with whom Penelope chooses, right? So, so here Telemachus is saying, well, the stronger argument is that I should be king, right? So he's starting to feel his place as the ruler, the person who really ought to be the ruler, right? Odysseus really, even if he comes back, he's been away for 20 years and he's kind of abandoned the people. So there's a little bit of tension here, right? There's a little bit of tension between Telemachus and Odysseus, right? It's like, shouldn't Odysseus kind of step down? Hasn't he kind of played his hand, right? And so this is another sort of strain or theme that will continue throughout from here to book 24. And tomorrow night we will pick up again and we'll take it on down to book 24. And that'll be the end of our time with the Iliad, and it'll close up our week. All right, next week we'll start with Herodotus. So it's just about 10 o'clock. I'm going to say good night. And as usual, I'm going to post the lecture. Whatever you think was interesting, just shoot me a little email, a couple of sentences. Keep working on those essays. And you know what? You could always send these emails even during class. I'll read them later. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. We will see.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
Thank you. See you next time out. Okay.
Good night, Professor.
Have a good night, Professor.
Have a good one. Thank you. Okay, we're going to close up unless anyone has any questions.
Professor, I just wanted to double check that you got my attendance because I was in and out of the waiting room.
Yeah, I actually did not, but now I will put it in. Okay, so if you missed anything, you can look at the blog.
Okay,
And-
I'll watch the recorded lecture again.
All right, very good.
Thank
you
you.
so much. Okay. All right. Have a good night, everybody.